child was born from the wife of one man through the semen discharged by another, you should maintain him. Upon hearing this, Mataji replied, O Brihaspati, you maintain him. After speaking in this way, Brihaspati and Mamata both left. Thus the child is known as Bharadwaj. Although encouraged by the Pravrito varito garbham Shapta viryam upashrijat Antarvatnyam bratri patnyam Maitunaya brihaspati Pravrito varito garbham Shapva viryam upashrijat. Please chat.
Antarvatnyam vratarpatnyam
Maitunaya brihaspati Pravrito varito garbham Shaptva viryam upashrijat Antarvatnyam bratri-patnyam Maitunaya brihaspati Saptva viryam upashrijat Antarvatnyam britrapatnyam Maitunaya brihaspati Pravrito varito garbham Shapva viryam upashrijat. Try. Okay, someone else. Antarvatnyam britri pratnyam Maitunaya brihaspati Pravrito varito garbham Saptva viryam upashrijat. Alright, let's do the word for word together. Antavatnyam, pregnant. Bhatripatnyam, with the brother's wife. Maitunaya, desiring sexual enjoyment. Brihaspati, the demigod named Brihaspati. Pravritaha, so inclined. Varitaha, when forbidden to do so. Garbham, the son within the abdomen. Shaptva, by cursing. Viryam, semen. Upashrijat, discharged. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. When the demigod named Brihaspati was attracted by his brother's wife, Mamata, who at that time was pregnant, he desired to have sexual relations with her. The son within her womb forbade this, but Brihaspati cursed him and forcibly discharged semen into the womb of Mamata. Purport. The sex impulse is so strong in this material world that even Brihaspati, who is supposed to be the priest of the demigods and a very learned scholar, wanted to have a sexual relationship with his brother's pregnant wife. This can happen even in the society of the high gods, so what to speak of human society? The sex impulse is so strong that it can agitate even a learned personality like Brihaspati. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. All right, so here in this section we see some features of human nature. And so the first thing that we see is in text 34, where it says that Bharad had 3 wives and they each bore children who didn't resemble the king. So they all had these babies, but the babies somehow or other, by some twist of genetics, they didn't look anything like the king. So they were worried that even though they were actually the king's sons, but the king would say, where did these kids come from? They look nothing like me. You must have had an affair with some other man, and reject the wives. So out of fear of being rejected by their husband, the king, they actually killed their children. So, yeah, what we're seeing here is that sometimes, pretty much all the time, humans don't respond well to fear. And I've seen this happen that, even within ISKCON, that, devotees who are in positions of leadership or authority, they kind of they try to use fear as a way of getting devotees to, do their duties, basically. Like fear of punishment or fear of rejection or fear of getting stonewalled or, judged or something like that. And it just doesn't work out well. That's not the way that we're supposed to motivate people to do things. It always ends up backfiring, as it did in this case, because who suffered was Bharat, because he didn't have a son, and a king needs a son. So because somehow his wives were afraid of him, then they did this heinous act of killing their babies, and and they all suffered as a result. So that happens when there's a leadership or management structure which is based on fear and punishment in different ways, whether direct or subtle psychological punishment, then it just doesn't work well for anyone. Prabhupada said that this society is based on love and trust, because we're dealing with devotees, right? And we're all kind of like in a vulnerable situation, trying to purify ourselves of anarthas, trying to develop a loving relationship with Krishna, working through our past, traumas and things like this. And so we need support, we need love from each other, and there needs to be relationships based on trust. Because it's true, fear does get things done, right? Like if a student fears the teacher, then they're going to do their homework, right? Because they don't want to get detention, they don't want to get expelled, they don't want the wrath of the teacher to come on their heads. But if they love the teacher, they'll also do their homework because they want to please the teacher. They want to maintain that loving relationship that they have. So it's a much better motivator, is love. So we should try to cultivate loving relationships and not fearing relationships, because fear just makes everything bad for everyone, and love makes everything good for everyone. So we need to really be careful about that, especially those of us who are in leadership positions, is to try to, be kind and win trust through love. Okay? And and also be careful about making assumptions, because the queens made these assumptions that, our husband's going to reject us because the children don't look like him. And he may have also made an assumption that because these children don't look like me, my wives must have had an affair with someone else. So these also assumptions always backfire. So we need to fact check, right? If we have a suspicion that something is going on that's not right, then, and the assumption starts to arise within the heart, just immediately be like, wait a minute, press pause on the assumption playing out, and go and talk to the person, like, what's going on here? I'm having some doubts, we're suspicious, a few of us maybe are suspicious, can you please clarify your situation? And then, fact check, especially before we start sharing that assumption with others and getting others involved, and then it becomes a terrible little rumor that scars everyone and blocks the loving, trusting relationships that we're trying to cultivate, that we need to cultivate in our movement. So now the situation is that Bharat doesn't have a son because his wives killed all their sons. So now he wants to get a son, and he performs a sacrifice to petition the demigods named the Maruts to get a son. And so they just turn up with this son named Bharadwaj. So now Shukadeva Goswami is going to go into some background about where did this Bharadwaj come from. So now he's kind of going to the backstory of Bharadwaj, which, so Bharadwaj comes from the heavenly planets, where there was an episode that Mamata, who was married to, what's his name, something. Uttaya. Yeah, Uttatya. Her husband's name is Uttatya, and he's the brother of Brihaspati. So Uttatya was traveling. So she was alone, her husband wasn't around. And then Brihaspati was attracted to Mamata, his sister-in-law, and then he saw that, oh, her husband is away, she's unprotected, then I can have my way with her. So he just went there full of sex desire and approached her. So Mamata was not willing, but anyway, she is a woman and with no one to protect her, and basically Brihaspati forced himself on her. He basically raped her. And so while that was going on, she was already pregnant. So the child within her womb, because we're talking about celestial beings here, so the child was conscious of what was going on, and the child objected. And he said, this womb is not big enough for the both of us, basically. Like, you're trying to, impregnate another embryo here in the womb, and, I don't want that to happen. So he objects, and then Brihaspati is aware of the embryo's objection, and so he curses that child to be blind. So later that child is born. His name is Dirgatma, and he's born blind. But although he's born blind, he's spiritually he has spiritual vision. And so he becomes a sage and a spiritual teacher who emphasizes the importance of inner vision, the vision of the heart and soul, spiritual vision over external vision, which can sometimes make us be more on the bodily concept of life. So that was fine. But before, of course, but then because he didn't want this other child to be in the womb, so with his little foot, he kicked the semen out of Mamata's body. So this was before any fertilization happened, because also when a woman is pregnant, she's not ovulating, so there wasn't an egg. Mamata didn't contribute an egg towards this, attempted conception. So the child kicked the semen out, and as soon as it touched the floor, it manifests into a child. So this was by the potency of Brihaspati, because he's not just a demigod, but he's the priest of the demigod. So he's a very exalted person with a lot of mystic potencies, and so just from his semen he was able to produce a child. So now Brihaspati, so now there's this child, and so Mamata, she's disgusted with Brihaspati for what he just did to her, and she wants nothing to do with the child. So then Brihaspati, he kind of, he sort of yells at her and he says, "You foolish woman, you need to take care of this child, because what's a man going to do with a newborn baby? He doesn't have any way to take, he doesn't, have the equipment to, as we were talking about yesterday, the day before, to feed the child. Child needs a mother. So he says, you need to take care of this child, even though, he was still born from you." And then she says, "Forget it. This is not my child. This is all your responsibility. You maintain him." But then they both, so what happens is the demigods come along and they can see the situation. So they're like, oh, this is not looking good. This is going to be very disgraceful for everyone. Let's try to save the situation. So they want to give a name to the child, because they're thinking that if we give the child a name, then they're going to start to look on this child as a person. Because, if a baby doesn't have a name, it's just the baby. It's just kind of an it, and if someone is an it, then they're not really seen as a person. But as soon as you give them a name, then they become in our psychology, they become a person. And then you feel like, well, there are human rights here, and we need to treat a person with some consideration. And especially since it's a baby, little small person, that actually was born from their bodies, then the demigods are hoping that they'll have some affection and take responsibility for this small person. So, but the name that they give is interesting, because it's based on this argument that Mamata and Brihaspati have about who's going to maintain him. So Bhara, the word Bhara means maintain, and Dvaj means an illegitimate child. So they're literally saying, you maintain this illegitimate child, you Mudha. He's calling the foolish woman. After he just raped her, he's calling her a foolish woman. Anyways, that's another point. But He's saying, Mudhe Bharadwajam Imam, in text 38, the Sanskrit. So he's saying, you maintain this Dwaja, Bharadwajam, this illegitimate child. And then she's saying, no, Bharadwajam Brihaspati. You, Brihaspati, maintain this Dwaja, Bharadwajam. So the demigods are like, well, since you called him Bharadwaja, since you said Bharadwaja and you also said Bharadwaja, then the child's name is Bharadwaja. So that's how, and it's funny because in the previous verse it says, the demigods, it says, Shlokam Enam Surajagu, that they enunciated this shloka. So what's the shloka? It's the next verse. It's this Mudhe Bharadwajam Imam, Bharadwajam Brihaspati, Yato Yad Uktva Pitaro, Bharadwajas Tatatvayam. So the shloka is that he said, you maintain the child, and she said, no, you maintain the child, but then they both left, so your name is Bharadwaja. So that was the shloka that the demigods spoke to name the child. All right? So the whole intention of naming the child was to emphasize the fact that you people need to maintain this child, maintain this illegitimate child. You had this child and it's your responsibility. It's not his fault, It's your fault, so now you take risk. But they weren't convinced. So both of them were just like, Mamata was like, no, this child has nothing to do with me. And Brihaspati is just like, yeah, I'm not dealing with him either. And they both took off. So then the demigods failed in their attempt to encourage them to maintain the child. And so they're just standing there like, all right, what are we going to do? And then amongst those demigods were the Maruts. So the Maruts, they took compassion on this child. They also had kind of a tragic episode in relation to their embryonic situation, in that, so they were the sons of Diti and Kashyapa. At that time, Diti was very upset because her first sons, Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu, had just been killed by Lord Vishnu, but she somehow blamed it on Indra. So then she approached her husband and asked him, after pleasing him and him offering her a benediction, she said, please, I want a son who will kill Indra. So then Kashyapa's like, oh, no, this is bad. So then he engaged her in a whole, process, which was basically a process of devotional service, and said, if you do this nicely for 1 year, then you'll get the child that you want. So then she does that process, and then they conceive, and the child is, she conceives one child. But then Indra comes to know that this child that's in her womb is supposed to be the person to kill him. So then he goes during that year, because Kashyapa tells her, you have to do this perfectly. If you make any single mistake in the execution of your vows during this year, then things are going to backfire. There are going to be problems. So Indra went in disguise during that year to try to just distract her or disturb her or somehow make her commit a mistake so that the child wouldn't, fulfill its mission to kill him. And so he identifies the mistake. And then because that mistake made her weak, made her vulnerable, then Indra, he made himself smaller than the smallest, right? He had this anima siddhi. And so he makes himself small, and he goes into the womb of Diti with his thunderbolt weapon, and he strikes the embryo and splits it into 7 pieces. And then he's like, he sees that all those 7 pieces are still alive. So he's like, oh no. Now there was 1 before, now there are 7. Then he's like, let me kill these 7. So then he starts, he strikes each one of those 7, and they split into another 7. Now 49, right? 7 times 7, 49. And he's just like, oh shoot, I better stop now. And also those embryos speak to him like, Indra, what are you doing? We're your brothers. And then he's like, oh wait, what? I thought you were born to kill me. And he says, well, that was the intention, but she did this nice devotional service for a whole year before conceiving us, so now we're devotees, we're not demons. We're not going to kill you, because we're also demigods, why would we kill you, who's the king of the demigods? We're here to support you. So then Indra said, okay, please forgive me, I'm out of here. And then she gave birth to these 49 Maruts. So the Maruts had a little bit of sympathy for this poor child that also had troubles in the womb. And they said, all right, we'll take care of you. So then the Maruts, they basically became the foster parents of Bharadwaj, and they were taking care of him and raising him nicely. And then it just so happens that being inspired by the super soul within the heart, that Bharat, who wants a son, does this sacrifice for the Maruts. Right? So why is it that he chose, out of all the demigods, why would he worship the Maruts? They're more powerful demigods. The Maruts are basically just like, helpers to Lord Indra that help him with like storm clouds and things like that. So why would you pray to them for a son? So this was obviously inspired by the Lord, right? Because the Lord had a plan. This was all part of the Lord's plan, that Bharat have an exceptional child, and not just an ordinary human child, but a celestial child, who was, father was Brihaspati, the priest of the demigods. So in one sense, Brihaspati was overcome by lust, and that's another thing that we're learning here, is that lust is very strong, right? Sex desire is everywhere in the material world, from, the time of puberty, if not before. Nowadays, kids, they already have, they start developing relationships even like when they're, 6, 7 years old, and then it becomes very strong after puberty, and it just goes until death. And it's not that, and no one in this material world is exempt, because that's basically why we're all here, is because of material desire. And right, Krishna says, Icha Dvesha Samudbhava, that we're born into this material world due to Icha, desire, material desires. And the beginning of all these material desires is sex desire. So this is, and Srila Prabhupada says in one purport in Bhagavad Gita, that this is like a shackles. It's like a shackles, that it's like an iron chain that keeps us chained down to this material existence, a cycle of repeated birth and death. And in the same way that living beings here on this planet struggle with sex desire, so in the higher planets it's the same thing. Right? Like Krishna says, Abrahma bhuvana loka punar avartino arjuna. So from the highest planet in the material world down to the lowest, all are places of misery, where repeated birth and death take place, where there's lust, where there's greed, where there's envy, where there's pride. So we see all these things playing out all over the universe. So yeah, so Brihaspati did this due to his lust, but then Krishna used it for his purposes. And we see here in the purport to the last verse, Prabhupada says, from this verse it is understood that those who are rejected from the higher planetary system are given a chance to take birth in the most exalted families on planet Earth. So he was considered a useless child. He was rejected by his parents in the heavenly planets, but then he was to be the son of Bharat, who was the ruler of the universe. So it just kind of like goes to show that someone who is like considered useless in the higher planets is like the most exalted being on this planet. So it gives you a sense of like how high the higher planetary systems. I remember when I was teaching at the school in Mayapur one time, one sannyasi came to speak at the school to all the children, and he was saying that he travels all over the world, and he was saying that sometimes you teachers here in Mayapur school think that you have problems with the children. But I'll tell you that the worst child in the Mayapur school, if you put him in any school, any like public school in the West, he's going to be the best, the best behaved. Like the worst behaved child in the school here is going to be the best behaved child in any other school. So it's kind of like that the worst person in the heavenly planets is going to be the best person in the earthly realms, because the standards are different. So. So a few lessons that we can learn from this pastime. And let me see if I forgot something here. Yeah. So the interesting thing is that these are Krishna's forefathers, right? We're going down through the dynasties, the generations of the lunar dynasty. And we're seeing all these scandalous things happening. And this is not the beginning, and it's not going to be the end either of scandals leading up to Krishna's appearance. So we already had Pururava and Urvashi, right? I think you've done that already. There was the moon. It starts from Soma, right? And Soma gets together with this person who is, I forgot the name, but he's like male 1 month and female another month, and it's just like very uncommon, right? It's just very unusual. So that's the start of the lunar dynasty. And then it goes to Pururava, who falls in love with this heavenly damsel Urvashi, and then they have this affair. She leaves him. He's going crazy out of distress from being, separated from her. Then she creates this fake Urvashi, and anyways, it's just like a mess. So a child is born from that, and then it keeps going. And then we just had Yayati, right, who marries Devayani, and then he promised that he wouldn't be intimately related with Sharmistar, but he does because of his lust, and then he's cursed to be old, and all these things. So now the next generation, now we have Dushmanta, and how he, rejected his wife because to save his reputation, so that didn't look very good. And his son, Bharat, this situation arises, and he gets a son who's a result of an illegitimate affair, and so it's all messed up. And as it goes, it keeps getting worse. Right? As we get closer to Krishna's appearance, it just gets worse. Right? Like Vasudeva and Devaki, they get thrown into jail. There's Kamsa's killing all the babies. Not only Krishna's older brothers who are born before him, but all the babies that are born in the whole Mathura district, everywhere. So in the generations leading up to Krishna's birth, we see rape, there's murder, there's infanticide, there's cursing, there's counter-cursing, there's rejection of innocent people. It's just bad, right? So what is Krishna like? Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. He's the Supreme Controller. So, one would think that if you were the Supreme Controller, then you would arrange all the best situations, ideal family, right? Not that you take birth in a jail, and you have to be immediately separated from your parents at midnight on a stormy night and just dumped off somewhere in a village, that you have your first grain ceremony, your name-giving ceremony in a cow shed because people are afraid that you're going to get murdered. And it's like, why would Krishna arrange that kind of situation for him to take birth? Why would he arrange that these are his ancestors, rapists and murderers, and like, why? Any ideas?
Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita about Yadayata Yadharmasya and Bhagavati Bharata. Whenever there's a rise in irreligion, he appears. That could be one reason. The other could be that Krishna loves drama. Krishna's character is like that. When we see ourselves and other people, we say, oh, we're all unique. So Krishna is the most unique. So then this is the most unique situation.
Yeah, that's true. One of my teachers once said that given the choice, like if Krishna's given the choice to have a nice, comfortable, smooth, easy situation, or to have like intense drama and tragedy and criminal stuff, he's always going to go for the drama. Krishna loves drama, and he'll also create drama in our lives. So anyways, don't expect everything to be smooth and easy in Krishna consciousness. But what you can expect is that Krishna's going to, be there for you during the drama. Right? So we see so much drama. And actually, if you look at the Pandavas, so much drama, right? They get cheated out of their kingdom. There's so many attempts on their lives. They go to this house of luck, and then it gets burnt down, and then, just like madness, what the Pandavas went through. But Krishna was there with them the whole time, right? Krishna was constantly supporting them, again and again appearing. He was their best friend. He was their messenger. He was their peacemaker. He was, he was their menial servant. He was their chariot driver. And so that's why Kunti Devi, spoke that verse. How's it go? Vipara santuna tasyat. Who knows that verse? Tatra tatra jagat guru.
Let the calamities come again and again.
Huh?
Is that let the calamities come again?
Yeah, it's that verse. Apunar bhava. Anyways, something like that. Manil's going to find it. So she basically says, let these calamities come again and again, because then we can see you again and again. And when we see you, by seeing you, we'll no longer have to see repeated birth and death in this material world. So devotees, you want to say it? Jai. All right, thank you. You want to read translation?
I wish that all those calamities would happen again and again, so that we could see you again and again. For seeing you means that we will no longer see repeated births and deaths.
Yeah. Yeah, so even in our own lives, there may be some calamities, there may be some drama, but it's good because in the drama, what do? Krishna, please help me. If everything's smooth and nice, we just start getting comfortable and thinking, actually, material world's not so bad. I could stick around here for a few more births, right? But when everything gets bad, it's like, yeah, we call out to Krishna. And Krishna comes when it's bad, right? What's a good example of someone who was a devotee who was in a really bad situation and Krishna came? Okay, disrobing Draupadi. Yeah, she was being stripped. She was totally vulnerable. No one was standing up to protect her. Krishna came. What else, Rohan? Huh? The Brajvasis. So many demons. Okay, Indra's rainstorm. Yeah, they're getting pummeled with rain and hail and lightning and cold wind. Like Krishna. And Krishna was there and protected them. Prahlad Maharaj, yeah, his father was trying to kill him in so many different ways, and Nrsingadev just appeared, saved the day. Sartak? Huh? Gajendra, yeah, he was like in the jaws of a crocodile and suffering and on the verge of death, and he called out to Krishna, and Krishna, shoo, he gets there so fast, Garuda can't even keep up with him. Nitai? Ajamil. What was his?
He was
on the verge of death.
on the verge of death. The Yamadutas were coming for him.
Yeah.
He called out to Narayan. The Vishnudutas stopped the Yamadutas.
Yeah, Narayan sent his messengers and saved him. Yeah, good. Devanshi?
Mother Earth and Hiranyakshipu were in the ocean. The boar form of the ocean.
Yeah, Varahadev came and with his lifted her up again. Yeah, so many situations. Jai? You?
I was sort of getting the material.
You were suffering like anything. Krishna, help! And then devotees came and like, join the Bhakti Academy. And that happens initially in our spiritual journeys, and it will happen again and again and again and again as we go. So we just need to keep calling out to Krishna, and Krishna is going to be there. And then, yeah, like Sonam said, is that Krishna, he waits for things to get bad, right? Glaunir Bhavati Bharata, when there's a decline in religion and a rise in irreligion, that time he comes. So when things are getting bad, that's a good sign. That means Krishna's about to come. Just be patient, right? And sometimes he kind of like, he doesn't come immediately. He even said that when the demigods, when Hiranyakashipu was disturbing the whole universe, demigods went to the Lord and they said, please do something about the situation. This Hiranyakashipu is a total menace. And Lord Vishnu said, just wait. When the time is right, I'm going to come. When my pure devotee is being tortured, then I'm going to come. Until that time, you just sit tight and be faithful that the end is in sight. So he didn't come immediately when they called him. He made them wait, some years. So, like that. Another thing that Krishna is teaching us through this, unsavory family situation of his, is that he's totally independent, right? Krishna is never a victim of circumstances, and nor are we, right? So, even though Krishna has this, all these things happening in his family, it seems very dysfunctional and terrible, he's not affected by it. And as parts and parcels of Krishna, as spirit souls, qualitatively the same as Krishna, we also don't need to be affected by these things. So, nowadays, Kali Yuga, many people are born in dysfunctional families, right? Parents get divorced, maybe you're put into foster care, maybe a parent dies when you're young, maybe there's abuse in the family, maybe you were abused in your family, or, so many bad things can happen. Maybe you're one of your parents is an alcoholic or a drug addict or a criminal or whatever. There's all kinds of combinations today. And everybody, practically everybody that I talk to nowadays has some like traumatic story from their childhood. So, but Krishna is showing that no matter how traumatic our childhood is or how bad our family situation is, we don't have to be affected by it, right? We're actually transcendent spiritual beings, and we don't have to, we're not victims of our circumstances unless we choose to be, right? That's a choice. Whether I want to be a victim and feel sorry for myself my whole life and use that as an excuse for all of my failures and my low self-esteem and my bad relationships with everybody, that's a choice. We can also choose to be like, no, I'm a soul, whatever, It's not, the external circumstances of my life are not limiting me, because I'm, as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita chapter 2, that the soul is not cut to pieces by any weapon, not burned by fire, withered by the wind, moistened by water, nothing. The soul is not affected by anything material, and I'm the soul. I'm not affected by any of these external circumstances. And then another thing that Krishna is showing by this is that bhakti is also independent. So because Krishna can appear in any situation, Krishna can appear in even the most filthy, dirty, unethical, irresponsible, criminal situation and still be Krishna. So that means that even if we're in a terrible situation, abusive, criminal, irresponsible, mismanaged, whatever, adverse situation, Krishna can still appear in our lives. Within that situation. We don't need to change the situation to be Krishna conscious. We just need to choose to be Krishna conscious. And we can be Krishna conscious in any situation if we're sincere. So some people think, the political situation is so bad. Even Srila Prabhupada was thinking that. That was his argument that he gave to Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, right, in the beginning, on their first meeting. As soon as he paid obeisances and sat up, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said, you're an educated young man, you speak English, go to the Western countries and spread Krishna consciousness, spread Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's teachings. And Srila Prabhupada said, but India is a dependent nation, we're under the British rule, who's going to listen to us? And Bhaktisiddhanta immediately cut him off and said, no, Krishna consciousness is transcendental to any political situation. It doesn't limit, there's no limit to Krishna, nothing can restrict or suppress the spreading of Krishna consciousness. So the same thing, we don't need to wait for the political situation to change, even if no matter how unfavorable it is. We don't need to wait for we don't need to first work through all of our childhood traumas before we can be Krishna conscious. We don't need to, even if we're living in the temple and we don't like the temple management, we feel like it's mismanaged and people are being unfair and biased and mistreating us and whatever. I can't be Krishna conscious because the management in the temple is problematic. No, we can be Krishna conscious in any situation, even if the management is bad, even if we think the whole world is against us, even if our families are unsupportive, even if the politics is insane, even if the weather is whatever. There's nothing that can impede our Krishna consciousness because bhakti is totally independent. So we don't need to wait for our situation to be perfect. We just need to be Krishna conscious now. Krishna doesn't care about the external situation. That's what he's showing us. He cares about devotion. He's attracted to devotion, and he can look through all the anomalies, all the difficulties, and see our devotion. Yeah, and in fact, like Sonam was saying, the worse it gets, the more likely Krishna is going to come to the rescue. So, yeah. So yeah, Krishna is demonstrating this, and no impediments to Krishna consciousness. So nothing can stop us from being Krishna conscious except ourselves. That's our choice, and Krishna is showing us that. Okay, so I'll stop here, open it up for any questions or comments. Yes?
Thank you so much for the class. So, Krishna, you said bhakti is independent. So, but Prabhupada focused on association of devotees. So you said circumstances can be worse. Might be my devotee friends changed. They heard something of me and they changed. So then the same vibe is not there.
No, you don't have devotee friends anymore.
Yeah. I'm just saying like that. So how can be bhakti independent at that time if Prabhupada focused on association?
Well, I mean, the association is supportive, right? If we have good devotee association, that helps us in our Krishna consciousness, that supports and protects us. But it's not that you can't be Krishna conscious without devotee association, in one sense, right? If you're sincere. The other thing is that you can always find, like generally if we have bad relationships with devotees, we need to work on those relationships. I mean, what association did Prahlad Maharaj have? He heard from Narada Muni in the womb. After that, he was surrounded by demons, right? Until Lord Nrsimhadev appeared. His whole life was just surrounded by demons. So that shows us that if you're serious about your Krishna conscious, you can be Krishna conscious even without devotees being there. Right? But we need the initial bhakti has to come from a devotee. Right? So, there's one, Prabhupada said that if you think you can be Krishna conscious without the association of devotees, you're living in a hallucination. Right? Because bhakti comes from bhaktas. We can't even start our Krishna consciousness without a devotee. So we need that jump start from a devotee. But then once our bhakti gets started, then, that can be nurtured by remembrance, right? So Prahlad Maharaj was always remembering the instructions of Narada Muni, and he was associating in separation. Okay? So we can also associate with devotees in separation. We don't need to be physically present, but we need to remember. Like that first year that Prabhupada was in America, he didn't have any devotee association. Right? But he was always remembering his guru, remembering his guru's instruction, remembering his guru's mercy, and praying like that. So, even if everybody hates us or we're in a situation where we're in a remote place with no devotee association, we can remember the devotees, we can think of devotees. And of course, nowadays there's so many ways you can connect, online with devotees and get sangha. So that's not really an issue. But if we have bad relationships, try to fix the relationships with devotees, because devotee relationships are very valuable. So they're worth working on. Don't just write people off just because, somebody said something about you didn't like or whatever. Really take the time, sit down, talk to the person, work it through, get a mediator if you need, but work on devotee relationships. Yeah. And if all else fails, find other association. Right? Okay. Jai?
So you said the child in Mother Aditi's womb were like demon, but because she performed devotional service, they become devotees.
She did the devotional service before the child was conceived.
But the father was demon?
Kashyapa and Diti? No, Kashyapa, you're talking about Mamata?
No.
Who are you talking about? The Maruts.
Aditi. Like the Indra went inside to kill them.
Yeah, so that was Diti and Kashyapa. Neither of them were demons, really. They were the parents of a lot of demons. But, basically Diti and Kashyapa, because Hiranyaksha and Hiranyakashipu, they were conceived at the wrong time, right? That's why they ended up being bad. And they weren't terrible. Kashyapa was a Muni. They weren't devotees, that's the thing. So, their kids were kind of questionable. Right, they gave birth to the Daityas and the Danavas. Well, Kashyapa and Danu were the Danavas, and Kashyapa and Diti were the Daityas. So they're all considered, their kids all ended up being demons. But that's also Krishna's plan. There has to be demons in the world, in the material world. Otherwise, it's not material world. So the demons have to come to this world somehow. So he engaged Kashyapa and Diti in giving birth to all these demons. But because she did this devotional service for 1 whole year before conceiving the Maruts, then they were, divine.
So my leading up question was even if you perform devotional service, there is still some demoniac nature or quality in us. And what is that?
Because of our conditioning. So it just takes a while, it's a gradual process. It's not that as soon as you start devotional service or, after a couple of years of full-time devotional service that you're going to be free from all this conditioning and demoniac tendencies. Basically, we've been in this material world for so many lifetimes, and most of those lifetimes we've been living kind of like demoniac lifestyles, you know, committing all kinds of sinful activities and acting out of material desire and greed and envy and so forth. So we're purifying those things away, but, you know, it takes some time. It's a gradual process. But yeah, even if our hearts are full of lust, anger, greed, pride, envy, and all these things, we can still be Krishna conscious, even if our internal situation is not perfect. So we also shouldn't think that, oh, I'm so proud, I have so much lust, I can't be Krishna conscious, I may as well just go out in the material world and try to fulfill my lust, at least I can be happy out there, because I'm suffering here in the association devotees, just struggling with all my faults and shortcomings. So that's also a cop-out, you know, because even with all these anarthas, we can still be Krishna conscious. So we need to be even more determined in our Krishna consciousness so that we can be more quickly purified of these things. Yeah. Did that answer your question?
Helps. Thank you.
Something else?
Well, just short.
Yes.
Like, it's so interesting that all of these funny things happen in the lunar dynasty, because the solar one, even in the most recent history, like they're Kshatriya clans, and so like Suryavanshis or the sun descendants were typically considered more disciplined ones, like Ikshvaku, Sri Ram, Dashrath, they all came through that lineage. But the funny characters usually, all these events are happening in the lunar dynasty. Even when the invaders were invading Bharatvarsh, like recently, like last century, some of the people who, what's the English for, like some of the traders, apparently one of the name was Jechin, they were also lunar descendants. So it was just funny that it always comes that way. And the word loony is also...
Loony, yeah. Well, the moon comes out at night, right?
Yeah.
The moon is there in the darkness. So, yeah. Yes, Amalaharina.
So when we were reading the soul pastime, I think it was Pumsavana Vrata, which she performed.
Yeah.
So Antariksh Prabhu asked this question, and we were actually about to ask you, but I think we all forgot. How much father's consciousness affect when a child is born? Because when we hear about Kashyap Muni, he's a great devotee. And we also say Sadhu Sangha, Sarva Shastri Kara. And just by a minor association of a pure devotee, we can also become devotees.
Yeah.
So, yeah, this was the question, that isn't it like he was supposed to be nice?
Who?
I mean, Hiranyakashipu.
He should have been good because Kashyapa was a good person?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that was all Krishna's pastime, in a sense, because he needed these giant Vijay to take birth, to be demons, so he could perform his pastimes, and so that they could quickly get back to Vaikuntha, and all that. So there's also an element there of, you know, just Krishna's Leela playing out. And so Krishna orchestrated this thing so that these two could take birth. Yeah. I mean, but also he does make the point that Kashyapa and Diti were not devotees, right? They weren't bhaktas. They were like, you know, they were like munis, so they could have been yogis or jnanis or something else, right? But they weren't practicing devotional service until they knew about it. Right, Kashyapa obviously knew about it, and he knew about the potency of bhakti, but he wasn't personally practicing it himself. And then in order to just save Indra and save himself from the reaction of, you know, having a child that is going to kill Indra, then he engaged his wife in bhakti just to save the situation, but it wasn't their primary practice. But he knew about bhakti, and he appreciated the potency of bhakti and how it would save the situation, right? But you know, a lot of people, they come to the temple and they see the devotees and they appreciate that, oh, people are worshiping the Lord so nicely, they're chanting Hare Krishna, they're doing morning program and studying scripture. They appreciate it, but do they do it? No. So Kashyapa and Diti were like that. They knew about devotional service, they appreciated the potency of devotional service, but they weren't practicing it. Only when he told, and Diti also, she was only doing it to get the child that she wanted. She didn't really care about what she was doing. It was just a means to an end for her. And also, even for Kashyapa, it was a means to protect himself from something worse. So they weren't really like doing anything to please Krishna. It was both about getting what they wanted or protecting themselves from getting something they didn't want. So, yeah, with that consciousness, also combined with the fact that they conceived at the wrong time and that it was the impetus for the conception was lust, not thinking, let's get together and bring a nice child into the world that we can raise in Krishna consciousness. Right, that wasn't their consciousness. So there was the consciousness, there was the timing, there was the fact that they're not devotees, and there was also Krishna's pastimes playing out. So a few factors contributing there to that.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, I think we are at time. So let's wrap it up. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai, Gaur